since last October, I believe. September, last time he was here. But this man can speak at the Slave Theater every Wednesday, whenever he gets ready. And he's known all over the world. And I don't care where you are, everybody knows John Henry Clarke. And we are so fortunate to have him with us. And so I would like for everybody to stand on their feet and put their hands together for our scholar, our elder, our hero, Dr. John Henry Clarke. Dr. John Henry Clarke. Dr. John Henry Clarke. Dr. John Henry Clarke. Okay, Dr. Clarke, you don't need no introduction at the slate.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to be talking about a subject that has no end, because the subject keeps coming back to us and we keep misunderstanding it. But before I start, permit me a brief personal note, because since I've seen you last, I've passed a landmark I never thought I would reach, because in my radical young days, picketing and challenging police, I never thought I'd get 60.
All right.
But I reached my 80th birthday since I've seen you. I went to Columbus, Georgia, where I grew up, and went to school up until the 7th grade.
All right.
Among my sister, I have a sister who dearly loves me, got all of my books lined up on the shelf, and she boasts about her brother who writes books, tell people, don't put your fingerprints on these books, don't be bothering my brother's books.
All right.
I wish somebody would bother them long enough to read them. I wish somebody would wear one out so I could replace it. But I was among some old friends who still survived, and my 4th grade classmates, about 3 of them are still around. I came home to do some serious eating. You Northerners don't know a great deal about this good Southern cooking. And my sister, who loves me so much, forbade me to eat these old dishes like crackling bread, and sauce, any part of the pig. Got plenty of food now. The pig is the cuisine of our survival. We were not a great pork-eating people in Africa. And we're not a great pork-eating people in Africa right now. But being enslaved, we had to eat what the white folks threw away. So they threw away the pig's feet. We made a delicacy out of that. Threw away the head. We made sauce and other things out of that. Sometimes they threw away the skin. We fried that and took some cornbread and mixed it with little onions and made crackling bread. All these things I can't eat anymore, and yet I had a wonderful time at home. Then went to Atlanta for 5 more days with colleagues and friends. And I didn't think about being 80 because I work at something 7 days a week. And nothing would bore me more than protracted rest. The struggle is my norm. Being outside of the struggle is abnormal.
All right.
I am from that generation that has never known peace and never expect to know peace. We will struggle to the end of our life so that another generation will know peace. We are the sacrificial generation. This is why we do not understand Booker T. Washington. He scratched his head when nothing itched. He laughed when nothing was funny. He said yes when it didn't mean yes, so that another generation can say, hell no. Came your time to say, hell no. You didn't say it. All right, to the subject, the world war against African history. I'm saying you do not understand the issues of today because you do not understand the nature of that war that has been mounted against you to remove you from the commentary of history and to say you have no history and to remove you outside of humanity and to say God do not love you. No, God loves you, so therefore when a crime is committed against you, no sin, because you're not the child of any God. And this is what is happening to you now. And this is why you do not understand. You keep protesting when people are acting rather normal, according to their norm. And they will continue until you set your norm. And the only way you can set your norm, you have to understand how to handle power. if you had independent states in Africa, all independent, if they united and say nothing will go out of Africa, no mineral, no zinc, no manganese, no gold, no diamonds, no cobalt, they can close down Western industry.
All right.
That's power. But when those things that belong to you are in the hands of other people, when you do not know enough about your own history to seize your rich prerogatives, you pay for it by being reduced to servitude. Now I'm going to devote some time to the president of Rutgers and his remarks, and to 3 articles that just appeared in the City Sun on the Arab slave trade, the present-day Arab slave trade. Too many things have happened in the name of religion that has nothing to do with religion at all. These are customs drugged into religion by the foreigners and the fakers and the fools who gain control of the religion for power reasons. There is nothing in any religion that separates men from women. And yet every organized religion that you know of downgrades the role of women. Every organized religion you know of, a male chauvinist murder cults. Now you have to understand the difference between religion and spirituality, because religion kills spirituality. Religion is the house organ of a bunch of gangsters. Spirituality has humanity. You do not kill anybody in the name of spirituality. And yet 2 world wars were launched in the name of God. And a number of smaller wars were launched in the name of God. People program other people to be less than other people and proclaim themselves Christian. Hitler was a Christian. He's not the kind of Christian I am, or I was. The Ku Klux Klan are Christians and proclaim themselves Christian. Now when he says he's a Christian, he prays to the same God you pray to, and he's not struck dead. Who is he lying to? Is it the same God you pray to? Or one his warped mind created? Now, you are shocked because of what the president of Rutgers had to say about IQs in minority groups passing an SAT. I would be shocked if he didn't say it and didn't say more. All right. Some of our children did not pass a white test created by whites for whites, and white children get advanced schooling in the test so they can take the test and pass it, and some of them get the answers ahead of time. And if they pass it, not because they're smarter than our children, but because they had the answers ahead of time. And they're taught how to pass these bogus tests. And there's no proof of their intelligence in the first place. Now he said it was a slip of the tongue. And maybe he could have been. But he is mild in comparison to others. He articulated what others are thinking under their thinking words. And this is nothing new. We begin to discover these things. Now we want to burn down schools. You came out of integration with some misconceptions. We should continue to build the predominantly black colleges. We could have built any predominant black college could have built into a school better than Harvard University. Why didn't you do that? No, you just had to be close to them. You had to be near them. You thought we got the NACP syndrome. You soak up education through osmosis by just being near them. Huh? No. They didn't teach your history. They didn't respect your history. They didn't look at you as a people with a history. How do you think they're going to control the world? Once you understand who you are, you will demand your prerogatives. You will demand the right to rule. They are more sophisticated now than they were 50 years ago. They don't send soldiers to conquer you anymore. They send a loan. They send dollars. Then they tell you when to devaluate your money. They even tell you who to fire. They even tell you who's going to be prime minister of your country. They are more ruthless now and more imperial now than they were before the so-called colonies fell apart. You're more colony now. Because you don't see their hair. You do not understand the nature of their history. You not only must understand your history and how it is manipulated, you must understand their history. When I came to New York, and after reading an essay by Arthur Schomburg called The Negro Digs Up His Past, and when I finally found Arthur Schomburg, and I wanted to know, I was a teenager then, so teenagers are this silly. I wanted to know the history of all of the African people, the Negroes and those in Africa, henceforth within the hour, his lunch hour, all of it. He said, sit down, son. What you're calling Negro history and African history are the missing pages of world history. Son, go study the history of your masters. Go study the history of the people who took your people out of history. Go study their sick need to take you out of history. If they had to take you out of history, then you've got something that they fear. You've got something that they do not want to compete with. They do not want to stand toe-to-toe with you as an equal. Their announced superiority complex could be the flip side of an inferiority complex. I began with an old chestnut, still worth reading, incidentally. H.G. Wells' Outline of History. It's Eurocentric, it's white in all its attitude, but the chronology is impeccable. His dates are in place. His events are in place. Now you can go over all of this and Africanize it. He's done your work for you. He tell you what happened when. And he show you exactly where he left you out. He had the Crusades, the European emphasis, And he leaves out the fact that the Ethiopians and the Coptic church did not join the Crusades, that the North African church did not join the Crusades. This was a European matter. He leaves out, he glorifies Richard, the so-called lion-hearted, without telling the real truth about Richard. Richard wasn't lion-hearted. He wasn't even religious. He didn't even go to the Church of England. So what's he on the Crusades about? To rescue the Holy Grail that wasn't holy in the first place and wasn't even lost in the second place. They wanted to marry him off to some homely, flat-breast princess, and he wanted to get the hell out of England and keep him married that woman. He was a coward, running from his royal responsibility. They joined the Crusades and ran. He don't tell you that part. You got to read some other books to get that part. Now back to this president of Rutgers and his apologies and all the fuss is over. I think the students should have made that point known, and once it's so well known, they should get off the picket line and go into the book and show him how well they can study and what good marks they can make, though they are going to a school ruled by whites. They can even take their books and on their terms and still beat them. And some will prove that. Paul Robeson went to some of the same schools. Ended up speaking over 20 different languages. Football star. And when they announced the great football team of that day, they had a 10-man team. They left Paul off of the team. He just now made the Hall of Fame. All those people that made the Hall of Fame, and Paul Robeson did 10 times more, and he just now made the Hall of Fame in the last few years. That's the school where Paul went. Became a lawyer, but a man who stood on the line for principle. He could be making $2 million a year. His salary was reduced to $6,000 a year, sang in his brother's church. The same people who milked him dry, using his voice to raise money. And when he was reduced, and he was singing in his brother's church, and he insisted that the fee be in a manner that the common people could hear him. $5 and $3. The same people who had bled him dry wasn't even there. Now he had an all-black audience. One of the most brilliant men we produced came out of the very school where that man is president. Good repudiation of what he said came past the SAT test. I imagine if rabbits were making up a test as to who would go into the brow patch, they would make a test that a fox can't pass because they don't want him in the brow patch.
All right.
This is what you have to understand. This world war to deny your humanity by denying your history. Now let's look at the 3 articles on the Arab slave trade in the City Sun. This is delicate now, because the brothers think that by being Muslim, you've got to endorse everything Arabic. If you want to know the difference between a religion and a religion, go into a white church one Sunday and go into a good black church the next Sunday. It's a different, not only different, it's a different religion. You don't necessarily have to approve of everything Arabs do in order to be a Muslim. The Arab is a pseudo-white. He's a white ass kisser because he wants to be white. He wants acceptance by whites. He will do the same thing whites do, downgrading you. He was in the slave trade before Islam, and he never got out of the slave trade. He's killing Africans in the Sudan because they're not Muslims. He's killing Africans in Mauritania who are Muslims but happen not to be Arabs. One day, African people will have to mount a case against the Arab and let him know if you're going to live in Africa, you're going to live on African terms or find some new geography on which to live. Mount a campaign, drive the slave trading, womanizing, raping dog into the sea and still be a Muslim on your terms. Because we buy things and swallow the hook, line, and sinker, none of the brothers have taken time out to study revolutionary Islam in Africa. That was used as a rallying cry against the Europeans. But if you don't know history, you won't know how to deal with this. Islam in Somalia, under the leadership of Muhammad bin Abdullah Hassan, called the Mad Mullah of Somalia, was revolutionary, anti-imperialist Islam. The Islam under Muhammad Ahmed in the Sudan, that unified the Sudan and drove the British out of the Sudan, was revolutionary Islam. And when Arabs came down with the British from Egypt, he called them a bunch of dogs unworthy of the faith. And he was a devout Muslim. You think you got to agree with everything a damn Arab have to say in order to be a Muslim? The Arab is the most corrupt element within Islam and the lowest in morality. The United Nations, all kind of committees have documented this. You chuck on the answer, it's all a lie. Everybody's a lie. I mean, no document is true. I have just on my desk 11 books on the Arab slave trade. And all I'm doing is a chapter, not a book. The United Nations have documented this in documents too, especially that leading chapter, slave trade in the Indian Ocean. When we deal with the relationship of the Arabs with the Africans, we should read a book called The Arab Conquest of Egypt. It's been reissued by A&B Press. You can get it in paperback. The Arabs proposed Islam as an alternative to Roman rule. The Africans saw by adopting Islam, they'd get the Romans off of their back. They did. But the Arabs replaced the Romans on their back, and he's still there. Look at every North African country. The black population is to the south, and the black population is in servitude. I'm not talking about something happened yesterday, but something is happening right now. The Arabs destroyed the effectiveness of the organization of African unity. They want no unity in Africa. To speak against the Arabs is not to speak against Islam, except for Africans that been no Islam. How many times do I have to tell you Zayd bin Harith and Bilal, both assistants to the Prophet, helped to bring the religion into being. But the brothers are so sensitive, they think nobody taught the Prophet Muhammad. Well, his rich wife hired these two literate men for the purpose of teaching him. Bilal is classified as a slave. They were both, Bilal and Zayd bin Harith were Ethiopians. Now you classify him as a slave. Bilal was a lawyer who was captured and reduced to servitude. The rich wife of the Prophet bought him out of servitude because he was a literate man. The one thing that is difficult for you to understand is that most people who come down to us as gods were illiterates. There is no proof that Jesus Christ could read and write. Buddha was the exception, because you cannot equate reading and writing with great wisdom. There were men who had great wisdom, great leadership, who could not read and write. I'm not advocating it, but this is a fact. Now, once you study Zayd bin Harith and Bilal, that once the Prophet was under pressure in Arabia, he told these two key followers, go to Ethiopia, go to that land of righteousness where no one is wrong. Look at that reputation the Ethiopians had. The Greeks called them the favorites of the gods and the tallest of men. There in Ethiopia, his followers waited out the storm and the controversy. Some converted Ethiopians to the faith. Some married Ethiopian women and never went home. And if you see some of the Ethiopian women, you can understand that. On his deathbed, the prophet was supposed to say, Islam will never forsake Ethiopia when Ethiopia is in distress. No nation in Africa has suffered more at the hands of Islam than Ethiopia. The Muslims from Eritrea, backed by a Muslim zealot, Gaddafi, destroyed the political effectiveness of Ethiopia. She's literally a weakened nation. At what point in our history are we going to understand that powerful people cannot afford to train you in the technique you need, because if they train you, you take their power away from them. Because they've got power they took from you. If we were serious about South Africa, we would have had no demonstrations, no loud noises. We would have started 50 years ago quietly smuggling young men and women out of South Africa, sending them to the best schools of administration, sending them to the schools of harbor management, airport design, sending them to the Colorado schools of mines. They would know every single thing they need to know in order to rule a nation, not only to electricity, but how to make the light bulb. And they won't go around boasting, we talk too much. Then they would gradually go to Africa on vacation, not go to South Africa. They would go to nations near South Africa and just wait. Then blacks who know military, blacks, former officers in the army, blacks who know landcraft, blacks who know how to take over forts, blacks who know how to take a bank and run it, blacks who know currency.
All right. There you go.
Won't ask for nothing in South Africa. Just move in there and take it all.
All right.
Take it all.
All right.
And say just simply, those whites who intend to live under African rule may stay. Those who disagree with it may go. And if you love Africa so much you insist on staying, we will give you a permanent peace that you can keep forever. The length of your body from head to toe, 6 feet under the ground. Why don't we find out how white people treat their enemies?
All right.
What did they do with Hitler's followers that they found? They put them on trial at Nuremberg. And they killed some. And some killed themselves. But none of them were permitted to stay in power. And once you tell a European he's not to hold power, not to control money, he's going to go crazy or go home.
Yes, sir. All right. That's it.
Because he didn't come there to be ruled by you.
All right.
Now the mistake was to shout such democratic phraseology,
All right.
non-racial government,
All right.
as though there could be a non-racial government.
All right.
One man, one vote.
All right.
The main thing you needed to talk about is African rule.
That's it. That's it.
I want a nation as African rule as France is French rule, as British is British rule. If that's a contradiction, then you are living a contradiction. I will share with you in Africa to the extent that you're willing to share with me in Europe. I will give you inch for inch as much land in Africa as you're willing to give me in Europe. In as many rights. That will sell that. No, but you want to integrate. You want to be part. We stay and help and stay and share. They do not have the mentality to share. They didn't come there to share. They came there to take it all and to rule it all. And when you do not understand their history, you are in a trap. You thought that it was a fight between the capitalists and the communists. It was a fight between those who held power and those who wanted it. The communists wanted power over African countries and wanted colonies just as bad as the capitalists who had them. But one thing which gave you some illusions about the communists is that the communists had an imperial empire in Europe. But the European colonies began to revolt. And this is what the fight with Russia is about. These people wanted sovereignty. Now, Russia made a mistake, and the communist world made a mistake, and everybody tried to point it out to them. It was called a red beta and a fool. No nation should ever declare itself officially an atheist nation. Man cannot walk this earth without a spiritual belief system. It is a belief system, a spirituality that lifts man higher than the dog, that gives man responsibility. But to declare a nation officially atheistic, I will let the churches stay that are there, but no more churches can be built. All the politics in the world will not substitute for the culture and the spirituality of a people. You can tamper with their politics. But once you tamper with their spirituality, their spiritual being, you got a problem. Now, no matter how communist the Poles become, they're still going to be Catholic. Now, I'm not arguing the rightness and the wrongness of the Catholic Church. The Poles going to be Catholic, right or wrong, even if they are communists. That prevailing spirituality is going to be Catholic. Now you go to tell them, call them an official atheist nation. Part of that culture comes out of the understanding of Catholicism, or their interpretation of Catholicism. Now, because the European is not original, you think is original, that's part of the trap you're in. You think the European has something to offer, he has nothing to offer himself. This fool has fought 2 world wars, killing in excess of 200 million people, his own, and still can unite against you. Lot of useless killing. The European fights for revenge just to show something. Now the Germans were basically defeated, and they finally decided they're going to teach America and the Allies a military lesson. This is what the Battle of the Bulge was about. They knew they couldn't win, but they thought they would let them know that militarily we know our business. Though we going down in defeat, we're going to kick your butt on the way. So that cost about 50,000 people. America, having won the war, having bombed the industrial cities, bombed an open city, no military target at all, called Dresden, 35,000 people, just for revenge. Now, if he do this to his brothers and sisters, now what in the hell are you expecting? Now you turning to him for hope? Ain't no hope there. Ain't no hope gonna be there. You go into his schools and you expect the kind of education that you need to reclaim the state and lift you above him and to be liberated from him? Are you sane? Are you real? With the same energy and the time, you could have doubled the enrollment of Tuskegee. Tuskegee didn't have to be a university. We got enough universities. That's a great liberal arts university. But Tuskegee was training us in nationhood, self-reliance, plumbers, cooks, orthopedic schools. Tuskegee's cooks and bakers school was so good, the army was sending their cooks to Tuskegee. All those schools are gone, except the veterinarian school is still there because it's one of the best in the world. It races over Cornell's veterinarian school. I was speaking to the president a few days ago, and he said, well, John, some people have to know mathematics. I said, well, there's no contradiction in what I'm saying. We need great technical schools. We need schools of mechanics. We need schools where not only teach men how to fix a car, how to design a car from scratch. But all the cars we use, we don't have one car company. With all the leather that is available, all the cows we attend to, we can't tan leather and make shoes. We can flow shine if we put our mind to it. We're making them apologize for being in the business of the shoes. You make Flowshine buy shoes from us. And as for sneakers, we let our idiots do that. The idiots make the sneakers, that's so easy. We won't even cite our best technicians for the sneakers. The guys who failed at other things, we let them make sneakers. Cause guys who've been in prison need some practice before we elevate them to higher. Make sneakers for a while. See how well you do that. Then we'll let you make shoes. We can create a whole industry. Why don't we do it? We have lost the history of the time when we did everything for ourselves. We have lost history of the time when we ran nations all by ourselves. We have been delinquent in studying the society that we produced that had everything in it that Karl Marx advocated that Europe never practiced. Everything. There's nothing in socialism or communism that wasn't already lived out in African society. We didn't dogmatize it. We just lived it out. We didn't dogmatize Christianity. We just lived it out. John Jackson has documented this beautifully in one of his last books called Christianity Before Christ. In another book, Pagan Origins of the Christ Myth. You think there's only one Christ story. Every civilization in the world of consequence has its own Christ story. Every civilization has its own creation story. And everybody think they created the beginning of civilization. When I was in the anti-poverty program, I was going to teach my students a lesson, so I asked an Igbo to come in and tell his creation story. So he said, well, dear children, now let me tell you how the world began. It began among us Igbos, a place called Anisha. Our God waved his wand and said, go forth, you great Igbo people, and civilize the world. And that's how the world began. Next day, I had a Yoruba come in. So I'm glad you children waited. Now you will know the truth. I will tell you how the world began. They called Dudawa. Our God saw fit to designate the Yoruba as the bringer of the civilization of the world. Children thought I was crazy. Next day I brought in a can from Ghana. His story was more beautiful. One thing I like about his story, there's always some good eating in the Ghanaian creation story. He said that his God, Anan, waved his hand, go forth, you great Akan people, and civilize the world. And we started out to civilize the world, and God said, wait, gotta have a chop. Nothing before the meal. In Ghana, all meals are called chop. Because that's literally what it is, a chop. And so girls came out, beautifully dressed, plates of gold, serving this great food. And after everybody got their stomach full, now go out and civilize the world. And that they did. And the good God blew his breath, created a great hole. Out came great Akan people marching to civilize the world. Years later, I'm in Ghana. I'm with a professor, and he's taking me out to the hole where civilization started. Just like an old gravel pit to me, nothing exceptional. So we rode for about a half hour. I said, Professor, now, according to my research, the Akan people used to live in East Africa. And they always moved out of places where people try to impose religions on them against their will. So they moved from East Africa to the Niger River. And when Islam came down, they moved from the Niger River to the Volta River. Then they had some difficulty among them, and some moved to the coast. And then a priest called Akamfo Anochi brought the golden stool and reorganized them into the great nation that they are today. That's essentially the story of the Akan people, isn't it, Professor? He said, of course, Professor Clarke, but are you going to spoil a good story with the truth? I said, no, Professor, no, they came out of a hole. You said they came out of a hole? They came out of a hole. Don't ever spoil good folklore with the truth. Don't spoil the Adam and Eve story by saying it's a joke. So if that story is true, then mankind is about 6,000 years old. Each time they dig in Ethiopia, they find somebody 1 million years older than the last one. Mankind is about 4 million years old. So what happened to the Adam and Eve story? Now what happened to the flood story.
All right.
But if you read the folklore of the Old Testament by Sir James Frazer, it's full of flood stories. Everybody got their flood story. When you don't read history, anybody can tell you anything. I enjoy folklore. I read a lot of it. I know the Bible is full of great spiritual inspiring lessons based on folklore. It is not less because it is based on folklore. But don't start killing people if they tell you something is not true. There is absolutely no documentation that Moses ever lived. None whatsoever, no place. If you got any, please show it to me. There is no documentation in existence about an Exodus. None. No place. Now, it's an inspiring story, and we believe it more than the Jews. Because we, in slavery, wanted to attach ourselves to a people who escaped from something. And so they told this escape story, and we bought it. And right now, you can get blacks to weep over the 3 Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace. Right now. A piece of folklore. Nothing to prove any of it. And yet there are magnificently written books dealing with how spirituality emerged. You will not take time out to read Alvin Boyd Kuhn, especially Who is This King of Glory? One of the best books ever written on the Christ story. Shadow of the 3rd Century, a book, one of the best books on the St. Augustine. Or Gerald Massey's book. Just read the first of his 6th volume, Egypt, Light of the World. And among his essays, read the historical Jesus in the mystic Christ. Now, once you know this and end the world war against your history, you will know what you will have to do. Because history is a tool. History, I have repeatedly said, is a clock that you use to tell your political and historical and cultural time of day. It is a compass that you need to find yourself on the map of human geography. History tells of people where they have been and what they have been, where they are and what they are. Most important, history tells of people what they still must be and where they still must go.
All right.
You cannot exist successfully and be full and whole and totally human and be absent from your history. There are certain very basic things about history. You don't have to read forever, but certain simplified approaches to your history that you haven't even read. I think Professor Joseph Harris's little book, The African People and Their History, it's in paperback, easy to get. A good introduction to our history. John Jackson's book, An Introduction to African Civilization. I've been told that my introduction to his book is one of the longest introductions ever written. You wrote a book introducing a book. And a little book that I wrote a few years ago, still in print and still for sale, it's an illustrated lecture, The African People in World History, published by Black Classics Press. So I'm not telling you some monumental, expensive thing you can do. Now, all these things put together, it would probably cost you about $12 to $15.
All right.
So there's no excuse, really. Teach a Scotch costs you more than that. You want to know where the money's going to come from? Leave off a six-pack. You get it.
All right.
When I was teaching the students, I used to sign students paperbacks at $5, $6. Students, but I don't have the money, Professor. How much did your sneakers cost? You're coming into my class with $150 sneakers. He can't spend $5.50 for a book that's required to reading in the class. We cop out on ourselves. We cop out on our children.
All right.
There's so much learning that has to take place before the child gets to school. There's so much learning that's fun. We fail to make it fun. We make it too dreary. I want to teach a kid mathematics. Tell me, Jimmy, how many steps it takes to get from the table to the door? None. Go to the left, then tell me how many steps it takes. Go to the right, take me how many. Go straight, tell me how many. You're teaching mathematics, and you're having fun with it. You teach him a piece of corn, the scientific effort that goes. Take a piece of corn, that same piece of corn becomes a piece of bread, that same piece of corn becomes cornflakes, that same piece of corn becomes so many things. Oh, you're teaching him basic science. Basic science. And all you're teaching is about a piece of bread. You can bring some raw wheat. This is how the raw wheat looks. This is how they refine it. Fine. This is how it looks as a biscuit. That's science. You ain't picked up a book yet. It's everyday living. That's science. That's geography. Kids read the papers about Somalia. They get a map and says, oh, this is Somalia. This is where it's located. You ain't picked up a book yet. You're teaching him geography. When the word is mentioned, you just point to him on the map. You put a small world map. When you read the papers, point to the place. There's a whole lot we can do ourselves. And when the child gets to the school can teach instead of keeping order all the time. You have to let the child know the school is where you teach. You have to give the teacher time to teach and not to keep you from hitting your next door student or knocking the books off. Great expectations need to be put forth from the very beginning, what needs to be expected of you. But in the final analysis, there should be a target in his mind and in your mind. Our ultimate aim is to build and sustain a nation.
All right. All right.
Therefore, do everything that is necessary to achieve that objective.
All right. There you go.
If a nation has airplanes, make sure that somebody knows how to fly them.
All right.
Make sure that someone knows how to make one.
All right.
Someone knows how to design an airport.
All right.
When you design an airport, you remember now, thousands of tons of weight has to hit that ground consistently for 10 years before you repair that apple. So the man that puts it down there better know his business. You better not put it on no soft ground, but reinforce it every day. People need railroads. Somebody have to know railroad engineering. And someone have to know locomotive design and locomotive repair. If our ultimate aim is to get back what slavery and colonialism took away, which is nationhood, then we must look back at what we had. They built the pyramids without an industrial complex.
All right. All right.
That's an achievement. You can't say it was done by Europe because Europe wasn't in existence.
All right.
Asia had no contact with Africa at the time.
All right.
When the Europeans came, they found no jail system because no one had ever gone to one. No word for jail. Did they bring in civilization? No, they ain't bringing civilization. They're bringing disorder. They're declaring war on your culture, your women, the dress, your art. They're making you despise the thing that made you feel good about yourself. They're manifesting in the name of a superiority complex and inferiority complex. They don't want to compete with anything you've done. So they want to destroy that and let you be totally dependent on them. Now, if you study Europe, you study the breaking up of the Soviet Union, that did not have to break up. And there was nothing basically wrong with a union. There's nothing basically wrong with a Soviet socialistic union, Soviet socialistic republics. Nobody objected to being in that union. What then did break it up? The main people in Moscow, white Russians, did not understand that they had a multicultural empire. They could not homogenize that empire around the thought pattern of Moscow. That had they agreed to respect the cultures of the colonized people, respect their religion, whether you agree with it or not, just respect it. Give them a fair share of the economy. Praise them for what they give to the total union. Realize that most of the agriculture in Russia was coming from the colonized part of Russia. And some of the best mineral wealth was coming from the colonized part of Russia. But the colonized part said, no, never mind, if you can't play straight, I'll take it for myself. I can market it myself. What's happening right now is an absolute disgrace. No use for those people being killed. Russia's not being run by a drunk. This man's not even sober half of the time. The low caliber, this other guy that they threw out, he at least had basic intelligence. And he was sober. Now, these are the people whose desire it was to rule over you. If they liberated you, they're going to liberate you so they can rule over you instead of the others.
All right.
Freedom is something you take with your own hands. You do not inherit it from a will. It is not handed down from one generation to another. And when you inherit it, you must re-secure it in your own terms with your own hands. Freedom is never secure. You can never take it for granted. It's a precious substance. Today, when we look at Africa, there is not a single African nation ruled by Pan-Africanism or nationalism. I have said a real revolution will occur in Africa when an African head of state prays to an indigenous African chosen God in public and without apology.
All right.
Until that day comes, Africa will revolve, but Africa will not move forward. You cannot use the breathing apparatus of the politics of your former master to build your state. This is something you're going to have to sit down and design for yourself and stop worrying about whether he lacks it or not. If he lacks it, chances are it is wrong. Has not spared this great African people for an ideal reason. We were never a minority. We number throughout the world with our people in Asia, in India, and over 300 million in the Western world, over 750 million in Africa. We number 1 billion people on the face of this earth. If we create an industry just traded with each other, we need no other customers. We have to turn to each other and believe in each other and love each other. We need ourselves first and foremost. I advocated something, and one girl said, "You're going to get yourself in trouble." I advocated that we need a hugging brigade. See a brother or a sister feeling down and neglected, walk up and give them a nice big hug. So one girl said, "You hug the wrong person, you're going to get hell knocked out of you." Okay, let's put it another way. When we see each other, there should be instantaneous, cordial communication. We're in the same struggle. We came out of the same historical womb. There was a time and place, the riverbanks of Africa, especially the Nile. We gave the world the social thought that went into the making of the Bible, the philosophical thought that went into the making of what you think is Greek philosophy. We gave the world its first humanity. Now we need to seek some partnership in doing the same thing again. And my suggestion is that in seeking the partnership, we find a mirror and see who's staring back at us. That's my partner. you and I will change the world, will give the world a new hope, a new lease on life, and a new humanity that will not only be good for our children, but their children and the still more beautiful ones waiting to be born. If we did it once, we can do it again. But you cannot change the world until you agree to change yourself. Thank you.
A loud ovation for Dr. John Henry Clarke. Dr. John Henry Clarke.